Ready?
All right, handsome. So, first of all, thank you for being here today to give testimony, to give insight into your personal journey. And I have the pleasure of knowing who you are. Side note, you are my spouse, you are my husband. But if you could tell the rest of the world, the rest of the people watching, who you are.
So, you think you know, but you have no idea. Diary of Matt Santana.
Okay,
Yes,
so Matt Santana.
my name is Matt Santana.
Okay, Matt. And so obviously you're here due to the fact that you are on a journey of grief and I don't want to say recovery, just learning how to be a new person with the current situation that you are in. And so go ahead and tell us how many children you have.
So, I have two that are in the presence of God in heaven, and then I have one still here with us. My daughter Jael would have been 9, and I have a son Levi. He would be 8 this year, and then we have our son that is with us right now, Elijah, who is 6.
Okay, so 2 have physically since passed, and 1 is still physically with us here. Okay, and you mentioned Jael and Levi. So you have actually gone through this not once, but twice.
Yeah, twice.
Twice, okay. And so, I don't want to say unfortunate, but sadly, since you have had to endure this not only once, but twice, we will then focus in on our first child, and that is Jael Cruz Santana. And can you recall the moment you found out we were pregnant with our first child?
Yeah, because my wife made that pretty unique. We're big time pizza advocates, and we ordered Papa John's, and the next thing I know, she dips out to the bathroom, and I hear this almost exorcism type style projectile vomiting going on, and I think that's when we both knew that something was up, just because this girl can put away some food, so it's never stopped her before.
Thank you for making me sound like I'm on my 600-pound life right now.
That's our next reality show.
That's our next stop. Okay, so I'm vomiting. We know something's up. I remember telling you, you better go get pregnancy test. I think it's happening,
Yeah.
right? And do you recall what year this was?
It was going to be, it was 2015. 14, sorry, yeah, sorry. She was, okay, yeah, sorry, 14.
So 2014. And so we found out we're pregnant with our first child. And how did that, in that moment, how did you feel when you found out, yes, we are pregnant?
I mean, I feel like the way people would describe it as cliche. I mean, excited, because everyone's going to feel excited. This was just more of something that was a surreal moment because, you know, when you get married, I feel like the first thing, especially in, I'm going to be honest, the Christian mindset is, when you have babies, I mean, you barely get done with your honeymoon and they're already expecting a baby to come right out the oven. So we had been married a few years already with no sign of a child. We weren't necessarily taking precautions, but we also weren't trying to have any children. So when it finally happened, our whole thing was always that it was in God's timing. And then for it to happen in that manner, I was like, okay, this is God's timing. So I just remember just being thrilled. I've always had a close bond with children, and so I was just thrilled to be blessed with the opportunity to be a parent.
So this is exciting for you. This isn't, you weren't taken back. This wasn't a whoops moment. It was exciting.
I think we were far too gone for a oops moment.
Yes. And so during this time, you were in a real close relationship with Jesus Christ, correct?
Yeah.
So he was your rock, salvation. I just want to make it clear, you were in a relationship with the Lord at this time of this pregnancy.
Absolutely.
Okay. So Jael, how did y'all or me, how did her name come about?
So
we find out she's a girl. So where did her name come from?
well, let me go back a little bit though, because I also want to talk about finding out she was a girl. So, so I've always never been fond of that saying to love at first sight, because I've always felt that was just a load. I mean, how can you feel like you love somebody? But ironically, I feel like us as men, like they're excited for the boy because you can wrestle, you can roughhouse, and it's things of that nature. And then I feel like moms are more excited because it's the dress up and it's all the stuff that they can do with girls. I remember when the family that threw us our gender reveal party, I just remember how excited everybody was. And I just remember when balloons burst and we saw that it was pink, it was just an overwhelming sensation of straight joy. Like, I know that I've heard some parents get a little bit discouraged. Doesn't mean they don't love their babies, but where they get a little bit like they didn't get the one that they were, in a sense, quote unquote, wanting, like a boy or that girl. But I just remember finding out that she was a girl, and it was just a surreal feeling for me to know that I was going to be able to raise, a young woman and let her know that she had a dad that was going to be there to comfort her, to protect her, and to guide her. But yeah, so finding out that she was a girl was just one of the best moments of my life.
And I even remember when the moment, because anybody that knows you personally knows that you are the best gift giver. You pay attention to people, you know exactly what to get somebody. And as soon as we found out we were having a girl, you immediately go out and buy her the cutest little shoes. And you were just so ready to dress her up, spoil her. And till this day, we still have those shoes, but I remember they were like navy blue and they had bows on them. And so I think that's so beautiful, and I want to share that because unfortunately there are a lot of little girls who grow up without that father figure, without that excitement, without having that bond, unfortunately. And so I right away knew Jael was going to be a very, very, very lucky little girl to have you. And so let's go back to her name. So how did we decide on her name?
I think that's one of the parts that makes this story just a lot more beautiful too, is we never had one of those where we were arguing about names. I feel like we wanted them to be meaningful. It wasn't just, it sounded pretty, but I remember Garis, aka my wife, the voice behind the camera, was reading out of the Old Testament, and she happened to come upon the name Jael, and she fell in love with it. If you haven't read it, it's a pretty ironic story. She drove a tent peg through a skull of a not so good man. So when she said that, I was like, okay, but she was just saying the spirit of our daughter just felt symbolic of that, somebody that was going to take life by the horn, so to speak. And her middle name obviously came from my wife's grandmother, Cruz, that has passed. Ironically, the same month that Jael was born. And then...
Yes, so Jael is in the book of Judges, chapters 4 and 5. And I knew that our little girl was going to exude strength, like this woman in the book of Judges. And Cruz was my grandmother's name, and so she took a huge part in raising me. So that's where that came from. And obviously we're married, so her last name is Santana. Okay, so you know you're having a little girl. You have a name picked out for her. And when did the moment happen where you knew things were taking a turn for the worst in our situation?
So we went to it was within the first trimester checkups, and the doctor we had went to see diagnosed her. At first, it was just one of those sort of like just a pause moment, because you can tell that the Sonotech or whatever their name is, but there was just something I saw in her face, and I remember asking, "Is everything okay?" And of course, they, because they can't get that information out because they have to let the doctor. And that's the moment I think deep down I knew. And then eventually they did diagnose her with what's called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, which what it does is it doesn't allow the blood to flow to that part of the body. And so they had already been talking about her having to be born at Cook's, the Dallas Children's Hospital. And kind of going back to now, the statement that my wife made is, my relationship with Christ is everything. And what I'm hoping that you all will receive for that is that true hope and that salvation. But most importantly, I want you to understand that there is healing inside of him, and we'll talk more about that, because there was times where I didn't see that grass always being greener. Obviously, I had my time of falling off, but I just remember I was so adamant, because the things that God has allowed me to see, and not only see but also take part in, I've seen people healed. I've got to pray for people, lay my hands on them, and they've been healed. It's nothing that I've done. It's not no power that I have, but it's the gift that He has given me to be able to be used as a vessel. So when I'm hearing these things and being plugged into so many different avenues and aspects of ministry, you start to almost feel like it's about this almost like achievement, like gold stars. Whoever has the most gold stars, you start feeling stuff like that shouldn't happen to you. So I remember just declaring and telling that doctor, like, "Oh no, our daughter's gonna be just fine." In a sense, it was arrogance, and the reason I say that is not the fact that God can't do something, but my arrogance wasn't. I didn't seek God at that time. I right away was just ready to rebuttal and say, "Well, my daughter's gonna be just fine." And so throughout that time, of course, you had a true prognosis or diagnosis, and are hearing that she has this condition. So I think right there is where my spirit was definitely shaken, because as a father, you feel like the protector. You want to protect them from every aspect, and the fact that there was something I couldn't, I just feel like the only thing I could do was pray, and not saying any void, but it just the turnout wasn't the way that we thought it was going to happen.
So we get this diagnosis on our first child, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. The doctors are telling us, okay, your daughter needs to be born in Dallas. Y'all are moving to Dallas, and we were very against that and very, no, God is going to heal her miraculously from this. She's going to be born, and we're going to come right back home. We didn't even bother to look for a place to live, because we were so adamant about, no. Because with this diagnosis, the doctor was telling us when she's born, she will immediately, after 2 weeks, need to go into heart surgery. Yeah. And then they told us Jael is going to need 4 total heart surgeries in her life. 2 weeks old, 2 years, another one, and then at 4 years old. Yeah. To correct this symptom. So here you are, full of faith, full of, we're rebuking this report. We're constantly, upset with the doctors. We aren't accepting what's in front of us. Yeah. Because we are set on the spiritual side of things. And this is something that we were also taught. Name it, claim it, kind of a prosperity gospel. And unfortunately, things went very left. So because of that, we unfortunately had to endure the greatest pain imaginable. So tell us about, if you can, tell us about the day she was born, which is May 29th, 2015.
So I'll get to there, but the one thing I do want to also share is, for those that don't know too, is throughout the time, being the fact that it was our first pregnancy, we didn't understand quite how often a child was supposed to move in the womb. We'd just be so thrilled when we feel any movement that we were excited, not realizing that there wasn't as much movement going on as should have been. So, yeah, uh, for those of you that know me, I am very family oriented. I'm definitely, an extrovert. I love chopping it up, getting to meet people. Probably talk a little bit too much. So
No.
when they told us that we were going to have to move to Dallas, I remember that the reason that there was a little bit of a fear too of that aspect too, not just because we were going to it knowing that our daughter was, needing some help, but it was just the fact that, family has always been my foundation. Like my mom, my dad, my sister, and I say my close friends, and obviously my spouse. But I'm trying to kind of build up because she was going to be with me during this journey. But we were having to leave all of our friends and family and take this journey. Fortunately, we do have one of my family members, Lori. We love you. Thank you for opening up your home to us. But she allowed us to stay there, and I remember going into it. And now, with growth and maturity, I just wish that we would have thought more logically, because we did go over there with the hopes of like, oh, we're gonna be back in 2 weeks.
Intent to come back.
That she's not gonna have any surgery. It was still just that naming and claiming stuff. And unfortunately, what I'm hoping people to understand through this is that doesn't make God any less of a healer. But the one thing I want us all to understand in this too is when you marry somebody or you love somebody, even if it's your mother or father, you don't just love them for that one aspect. Like, let's say that they're a giving person. You don't just love them solely because they're a giver or they have a kind heart. You love them because there's so many attributes that make them that individual that makes you love them. So what happens is we were solely focusing on God as just a healer, and when He didn't do the healing aspect in the way that we wanted, it kind of grew this border because we're like, hey, you didn't do what you said, but there in a sense He never told us He was going to do that. So being in Dallas, away from our loved ones, I just remember just being very adamant about what we're going to experience. And then, we were so bent on the healing that I'll never forget, the day before she was born, we went to the outlets. We went out on eight.
Right. You bought her more shoes.
I'm a sneakerhead myself, so yeah, I had my daughter, she was going to be fresh. But I remember that we even went and got some brick oven pizza. That stuff was fire. And I just remember we go home that night to my cousin Lori's. I was let to stay there, and my wife Gladys wakes me up about 4 in the morning and tells me that she just feels like her stomach's on fire. Right then I knew something wasn't right, and for somebody like myself that loves rain, but we live here in West Texas, we're not used to getting that much. So I'll tell you, the rain over there in Dallas is quite different.
It does the most.
Yeah, it was definitely.
It was doing the
there's
most.
no other word to say other than extra that day.
Yeah.
Because it's raining, so I call up to the hospital to try to speak to her doctor, and they said just try to get here. Well, I'm trying, but it just so happens that all the floods were being detoured, and you're having to go down this route. It got to the point where I got lost.
And the hospital was like 10 minutes?
Not even. It was more
closer?
like 5 minutes. I remember pulling into a Taco Cabana parking lot. It was, by this time, was maybe like 7 in the morning-ish, 6. And I called the ambulance to tell them where we're at. I said, my wife needs to be taken into, y'all's care immediately. Long story short, the ambulance pulled up, and I'm following. The next thing I know, that's why I said it was like 5 minutes with them, obviously, doing the way we got there. I was like, oh, all right, okay. Just remember that elevator ride felt like it was the longest ride ever. Not because, I don't like closing spaces anyways, and elevators are kind of creepy, but it was just the moment of like hitting that button, going into the room that they told me where my wife would be, and just thinking, okay, like this is it, like this is happening. There was excitement, but there was also just fear because of what she was going through, my wife. And so I remember finally getting into the room. I mean, everything was just hustle and bustle, was kind of chaotic, and they let me know that my wife was gonna have to have an emergency C-section. And what made that even more scary, I mean, at a time, not only are you about to become a father and a mother and all that, but your family's not around. And because it's an emergency C-section, you just want to have that love and support. So I remember having to call my mom and dad and my mother-in-law and just really can't ask for any better parents. It's like they flew to Dallas.
Yeah.
Feel like they made it there in 3 hours. And if you know my dad, to him, 60 miles an hour is fast. So I know that the fact that they flew, that they were ready. And I remember they're prepping my wife for the C-section. And
so let me just insert here. The reason I'm having an emergency C-section is because I actually developed preeclampsia. So basically what that was is your wife's organs are swelling. She could die. Her blood pressure is out. Yeah. I mean, it was a bad situation for myself and our daughter.
Yeah.
So not only was our daughter coming, you're having to deal with a whole new battle.
Yeah.
And so our parents get there, or flew.
Yeah, well, I mean, they unfortunately still weren't quite there. I mean, obviously because of how fast it was. So, those of you know me too, I am a sissy when it comes to blood. I mean, I do not like seeing cuts, things of that nature, even on my own self. So the fact that she was having to have a C-section, obviously there's going to be some cutting going on and some blood. They bring me in there, and I remember just... So I'm going to backtrack real quick because I really feel like this is part of a beautiful story. When I first gave my life to Christ, and I'm trying, like I said, to make this part short, but my aunt was killed by a drunk driver, unfortunately, and my aunt, Vicky, she loved the song By Your Side by Sade. And when they were about to perform the C-section and it was all going on, I remember feeling so nervous that, because unfortunately I do battle with anxiety. I'm not claiming over myself, it's just somebody who's, I guess, overly anxious sometimes. And I remember being so out of my realm, trying to make sure I'm breathing but holding my wife's hand, and the song By Your Side came on. And I just felt like it was a sweet reminder from heaven that our loved ones are watching after us. So remember, that just kind of gave me such a strong sense of peace. And so the C-section begins, and obviously my wife's a straight up champ. She handled it like a true gangster. She endured it, and I remember her asking me if I was okay during the middle of her C-section. She asked me if I'm okay.
Yeah, you were about to faint.
Yeah. It was like the sound. I still remember the sounds. I still remember the sounds going on.
And being tugged and pulled and cut up, and I'm like, "Are you okay?"
Well, after the C-section, the doctor reaches Jael over, and going back to that statement I shared earlier about not believing in love at first sight, that all came crashing. At that very moment, I truly believed in love at first sight. Just nothing you'll ever be able to experience it. No dream house or car that you've ever wanted, nothing like that could compare to that moment of seeing your child. And like I told you, immediately just fell in love with her. And as beautiful as she wasn't crying. There was no vocal anything going on. So I already kind of had a feeling, and then they rushed her over to this cart area, I remember my wife asking, everything's okay, and I'm trying to comfort her. Said, yeah, they're just having to take care of her. And then they, kind of take me back out the room, and we're waiting. And then they finally bring my wife back into our room, and we're waiting. And what felt like a dang eternity, you're waiting and waiting. And it probably was, about an hour and a half, but it felt so much longer, asking them what was going on. And then they kind of let us know that our daughter has no movement. And so we have no idea as to why that's happening. And then they finally come in because you gave birth at Cooks, right? Is that?
No, it was.
Not Cooks.
Southwest. I forgot the name of the hospital. But
it was right down the street in a sense.
So the hospital they sent me to and I delivered at was a couple blocks away from Dallas Children's. Mm-hmm. And so Jael was born, not breathing. They had to resuscitate her. They had to intubate her. On top of this, we know she's sick from the heart, but now she also does not have any muscle movement. So we're in Dallas. We're now dealing with the situation of another battle. Our daughter is not moving. So we go into, did they paralyze her? What's going on? Like, she was moving in the womb, but like you were saying, not much. Now that we have more information. But so you're in this situation. Our daughter is now intubated. She can't breathe on her own. And so from there, how are you feeling? If you can talk about it, how were you feeling after all these new problems arose?
I felt let down, definitely just because praying vigorously, not just us, but not only our, blood relatives and friends, but our church congregation. There was so many people praying, so I just remember thinking to myself, like, okay, what's going on here? But I also remember feeling a very strong sense of resentment towards myself, because I felt I'm supposed to be her father, and I want to be able to protect her, and I can't do anything at this moment. And so when they let us know that they're going to be transferring her to Jael Children's from that hospital, I remember they asked, obviously my wife having a C-section, and apparently it was a very chaotic C-section. It wasn't, not that any C-section is to be taken lightly, but this one was very complex. And so luckily, that's what I'm saying, another shout out just to our parents, but my mother-in-law stayed back with my wife, which I was so thankful for that she had somebody there, because I had to go and put on my big boy pants. I had to go and be at the hospital with my daughter, not understanding. And I think it's just the fear of the unknown too, because nobody knows what's going on. And so I just remember being there with her, and like I said, she was intubated. They were helping her breathe, no movement. And I just remember thinking to myself too, like how much I wanted my wife on my side, but I don't want to be selfish because she's sitting there, literally cut up. And so I'm having to combat all this emotions, because I'm trying to be strong for my daughter, and you're not getting any answers from the hospital. I did have unforgiveness, like my wife said at that time too, because we're thinking, did they do something throughout this? You'll understand more of what happened too, but it wasn't their fault. But at that time, you're just looking for anybody to blame. But like I said, my mom, was there with me because my wife wasn't able to be there. And I'll never forget, it's so hard to get any sleep, nor rest, or eating. And I do remember that the second night, that finally got a little bit of sleep, and I wake up to the sound of the machines that normally go off when they need more medications or whatever it is, or the heart rates are dropping. And I remember waking up and my mom tried to call me. I said, "What's happening?" And she tried to tell me everything was okay, but you know, as a parent, that something wasn't right because there was so many nurses blocking in and out of that room. I asked what's happening. The next thing I know, they have a chaplain there. And once again, like I said, I'm a believer. I know Christ, but I'm saying that chaplain takes me around, and we were just walking around that same floor, and I'm asking, and I'll never forget that I asked straight up. I said, "I know the fact that they have you here." I said, "Did they call you here because my daughter's passing?" And they disclosed that they can't share that information, but they're just trying to be there for support. And I already knew. I said, "I need to get back to that room." I remember I couldn't breathe. If you've ever got hit in your stomach or the air knocked out of you, it was like that times like 100. I just felt like I wanted just to faint right there. I remember having to call my wife and tell her the news of Jael was possibly going to be going home that night to heaven. And of course, having to hear my wife's voice break over the phone, there's nothing I can do. The next thing I know, here comes my wife, all stitched up and against the doctor's orders, comes out of a selfless act, which us all as parents should learn from, is you're selfless for your children. My wife shows up, and I remember feeling like a little kid when you see like a superhero show up. I remember seeing her, and she might as well have been wearing a cape because her spirit called me so much that I was just thrilled to have my partner there. And I'll never forget because, like I said, Jael's levels were all over the place, and my wife goes up to our daughter Jael and is just right there by her side. And she just starts speaking to her daughter. And it's like everything came to a halt and stop. Jael's levels came back to normal, and it's like she needed that more than even I needed that. She needed her mama, and her levels just came down, and it was just like just such a miraculous moment to see that the impact that her mama had. And she got to stay a few hours, like I said, once again. She has such adrenaline at that time that I'll never forget that way she like almost pounced into, because she went from a wheelchair, she almost pounced right into Jael's room, and at the time she didn't realize all that was going on. So she, after the adrenaline, I remember she started actually feeling the soreness, and she eventually, got to spend a few hours with Jael, and then she had to make her departure to be back to where she needed to get the care for herself. And yeah, I mean, it was hard being there all those days just by myself, and not knowing what to do.
So at this time, could you already feel yourself being defeated? Emotionally, spiritually? Could you already feel yourself just withering away?
Yeah, like I said, not just spiritually, but physically. I dropped so many pounds there too because I'm not worried about eating. You just want your child to be well. And
so Jael is in the hospital. She has her hypoplastic, but now she's not moving. So the doctors don't have an answer for us as to why our daughter's muscle mass has somehow depleted.
Yeah.
So this is the reason why she's intubated, because she can't move on her own, so she needs this machine to breathe. So we're in the hospital. I finally get discharged because they told me if you can walk, you can leave. So I made myself walk. So here we are at Dallas. Dallas, Texas, at this hospital. Things are getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse every day. Jael's not getting better. The doctors cannot figure out what is going on with the muscle mass. So because of the muscle mass depleting, she then can't have her heart surgery because she's not strong enough now to have this surgery.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're at a place where we're to what? Day 11? 12. The doctor brings us in, me, you, and your dad, to a room, announces, look, there's nothing more we can do for this little girl. I'll never forget, he said, this young lady, she needs heart surgery. We've ran tests, they did every test possible, which I'm forever grateful. They ran every test possible that they could to figure out the muscle depletion. So now we're faced with this little girl's kidneys are I forgot the word he used. Anyway, Jael is basically...
Her body was getting swollen.
It's just her body's giving out. So the doctor gives us the news. You know, it is time to let Jael go because she's basically on life support at this point. And so when you hear the doctor make this statement, what happens inside of you?
That's a pretty heavy question to be able to answer all just at once. Just heartbroken, devastated, let down. I mean, the list can go on, but I just remember ultimately that's something that you never want to hear as a parent, that you haven't let your child go. And I'll just never forget having to let our loved ones, because fortunately, like I said, most of our immediate family, were there, but having let some of our friends and family know. And I'll never forget, though, there are some people that I do want to give a shout out to, Pastor Bill Foster, and Todd Gadley from our church. Made sure that they were there on top of our immediate family, and then also the good friends we had that were there by our side already. But they were there, just kind of in a sense, say their goodbyes. Even phenomenal couple named the Farrells, who now they both are resting in eternity as well, and I'm hoping that our babies greeted them there. But I'll never forget, that was like the most traumatic night of sleep ever. Or I don't want to sleep.
So this is the night before.
The night before because they gave us this news on day 12 of her life. So technically, the day that she was about to enter rest was day 13. So day 12, going to day 13, that night was just, I remember they brought like a gurney, I guess, if that's what it's called, but where you got to sleep next to her.
A wider hospital bed,
And I just remember the next morning, having to face it. And we let everybody come and say their see you laters to her. I don't want to call it goodbyes anymore. Their see you laters. And we, after everybody got done, of course my wife and I were the last ones with her, and they came in and they took her off. They took her off oxygen, and the thing, I skipped one part that I did want to share. The thing about Jael, for her not being able to move, she was very feisty. She was a fierce little girl, and her spirit was felt. Even the nurses, would talk about her. She would just either give you a look like, I'll allow it, or hey, get away from me. But that little girl, I just remember getting just caught up in her eyes. And I know she was very selfless. I know most people aren't able to fathom that or grasp what do you mean by a child, but you have to think about stuff because we are spiritual beings living in a physical world, not the other way around. Like our home is in the spiritual realm, but I'm saying my daughter was wise beyond her years, right? And so I remember when it was time to, like I said, just you and I, or my wife and I were the only ones in the room finally, and Jael passed away very peacefully. And when I'm saying that my wife and I take God serious, I'm hoping that everybody can come to know Him this manner. Yes, we didn't receive the healing the way we wanted to, which is, we feel it's unfortunate because we didn't receive it the way we wanted to, but there's so much that you look back at after something that's happened. So I remember on one of the days, and I know I'm kind of backtracking, but at the Dallas Children's Hospital, they have this beautiful little garden area, and I now know why, because when you're surrounded around this hospital and just the hustle and bustle and the noise beeping, they have this very, like, just garden with a little bit of a waterfall, and it's just tranquil and it's peaceful. And I remember that's where I spent my time, a lot of time. And my wife is the warrior of this story. I'll tell you that she was able to stay by our daughter's side the whole time. But like I said, I battled with a lot of resentment towards myself, just feeling like I didn't protect my daughter at that time, wondering if there was something I did, things of that nature. But I'll never forget one of the times that I went out there to that garden area, and this family were out there as well. And I'll never forget, I held the door open for them, and it was a family, mother and father with their son, and he was walking around with an IV, and I forgot, it looked like there was two other sacks, so I'm not quite sure all that he was taking, but he just looked so frail and so sick. And I'll never forget looking at that family member's eyes and seeing how tired they were. And I saw that child and how sick he was. My heart broke, because not that I wouldn't have done it, nor do I ever doubt my wife would have been willing to let our babies go through this. But I feel like it was a selfless decision that had to be made. And I think our daughter was one that chose for us, because when we let her go...
So she passes away on June 11th, 2015. She passes away in my arms. And at that moment, we're still not even done.
No.
With our hope.
No. That's what I was finishing off with saying, is that we believed in God's word so much. Let me rephrase that: we still believe. It got shaky, but we actually prayed for our daughter to come back to life. If you guys are familiar with Lazarus, Jesus brought him back after 3 days. So our daughter had just passed on. So we fought and prayed, and unfortunately, we didn't get a miracle that we were expecting. And like I said, after 13 beautiful days of us getting to spend time with that beautiful baby girl, my Jaybird, that's what I called her.
Your what?
Jaybird.
Jaybird.
Jaybird was the name that I just had for her. After my wife and I had our own time trying to pray her back, and we realized that I think that's a story that you should tell sometime, but there was a way that we knew that she wasn't coming back. And we started our loved ones come back into the room, of course, and obviously devastation's in everybody's eyes, pain, despair. And I remember there was so many people in that room that have been influential in my spiritual walk. And like I said, our pastors were there, best friends, family members, and I see everybody crying, everybody. And these are normally the people that I seek comfort from when I'm going through something that is just heavy on my heart, or something that's tearing me apart. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing every person I look to, my mom, my wife, my best friends, pastors, everybody weeping. And I think one of the ones that my sister, the one that stood out to me still to this day, because I've never seen my dad cry. I remember finally looking at him. I looked at my dad, and I finally seen tears coming down his eyes, and I just remember seeing my dad just having to leave the actual room. And in that moment, I think God showed me something, because you can't be dependent on man nor woman, because in that time he helped me to understand is that everybody that I normally seek peace from, they were all devastated and crying, and I felt like at that very moment God's spirit fell upon me, because I remember sharing with everybody at that moment, with all the, like I said, the tears flowing, but God spoke to me at that very moment to give an encouragement word about Jael's life. And I still look back to this day and said, I know that wasn't me, because I should have been just as a mess, but he allowed at that moment for me to be able to speak on behalf of the life that Jael lived. And
so even in that moment of her passing from earth into a heavenly realm, you could still feel the presence of the Lord. So even though it was a physical death, there was still, would you say, peace? There was a sense
absolutely
of peace.
That's, if anything that I can sit there and say about this from our children, it was peace. I mean, that's what I can say. The only emotion that wasn't chaotic, so it was definitely peace.
Right, and the Lord does tell us, I will give you a peace that surpasses all understanding. So even in the midst of what should be a chaotic moment, something that forever changed your life, Jesus was still in the midst and was still bringing you some sort of peace and comfort during this time. So, Jael passes on to the next life to be with Christ. That's our belief. And so we now then have to come back home to West Texas. We're in East Texas. We have to drive back the next day with my mom to West Texas. So when you got back home where you were living at this time, were you still sensing the peace, or was that starting to withdraw?
I wish I could say that I still felt it, but the scripture tells us the more we seek, the more we find. And it's like trying to play hide and go seek with somebody, and you go tell them to hide and you just sit in the chair. That's what I did. I allowed myself to become stagnant, and I get it. People will still say, that's understandable, but technically it shouldn't have been. I get it to allow somebody their time to feel, but I stayed there way too long. But yeah, the peace definitely went.
So you started feeling the peace wither away.
Yeah.
From your presence. Okay. So our daughter passes on. And so now you're entering into a world of, what are you feeling now?
You're living in a new reality. Everything that once made sense to you is completely flipped upside down. That's the part I will still say to this day. You're never the same after losing that child. And there's so many people that will tell, and that one of my hopes for this too is that you understand that we all grieve differently, and there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Mm-hmm. But what I want people to understand is, and for those of you that maybe if you haven't even been through something like this, but you know somebody has, the best thing is to do for them is to do nothing, right? And what I mean by that is be a set of ears and be a shoulder that they can cry on. But at those moments, to feel that you have to have the right words, there is just no right words.
So in this new journey you're having to start, Did this affect any personal relationships for you?
More than I like to admit, yeah. Just kind of touch base where I'm at now. Now there's forgiveness and there's that hurt's been healed. Took time, right? But yeah, there was several people that made me and you feel like lepers, meaning that it almost felt like they didn't want to have any association with us, whether the intentions were good, or ill. I just feel like there was so many people that were in a close friendship with us that, and I get it. Like I said, they probably, it goes back to what I said. They probably know what to say, but they not even a simple "How are you?" And one of the things that I would like people to take away too is just simply a "Hey, we're thinking of you," or simply simple "I love you" will suffice and go so much further than one could ever expect. So it definitely affected some relationships. Some were able to be mended. Some weren't able to be reconciled. And I mean, my thing is, I wish nothing but well-being for them and peace upon them. But it definitely affected.
So you did lose
Yeah.
a couple of friendships and maybe even some relationships with family members. So this now starts affecting even those things. How did this affect them in your eyes? Let's talk about immediate family.
Well, I mean,
from what you could see.
I mean, you just see the devastation in them as well. I mean, they wanted to be there for us as well, but at the same time, they're dealing with the loss of their, grandchild, and they're also having to see, not did they lose their grandchild, but they're having to see their children hurt. So you become so hypersensitive, though. That's the part where I'll take up my own ownership and hold myself accountable. Is you become ready to, choose violence. You're ready to go to war just for somebody not saying something in a tone that you feel is respectful towards what you're going through. So you have to be cautious of that too, because I believe that especially close family, their intentions were meant to be well received, but it's just the way that you take it on.
So now you're dealing with the loss of your daughter. You're confused. Is your relationship with God starting to increase, or does that start decreasing for you?
Sadly, it decreased. I want to say that there was no relationship. I tried at first. A ministry that I was a part of, I still kept trying to serve, but my spirit wasn't in the right place. I just couldn't, because you see everybody on the outside world smiling still, and their lives are still going on, and you're sitting here with this just agonizing pain. So I eventually just completely allowed myself to fall off. Wasn't really wanting to hear the God stuff, because like I said, whenever you're somebody who's been in part of that aspect of seeing the move of God, what I shared earlier about seeing healing and being used to heal people, like I said, I want to reemphasize God allowing me to be able to be used. But you have this question of, why didn't this happen for my child though? I mean, then you have some people that kind of get into your mind, and once again, I think people's intentions were meant well, but it can be foolishness that comes out of their mouth. So one of my I guess things that I held on to the last time was when certain people tell us, like, or maybe it was something that we didn't do or that we did do that affected this. So of course you're already in such a pit of emotions that anything that is said, it just affects you in an ill manner. So, but yeah, I mean, it was just some of the unfortunate and foolish things that some people would say too. That.
So you're dealing with being lost in a sense of, I don't know how to feel, what is okay for me to feel. Your relationship with God is now being very tested, because the very source that could have physically saved our daughter on earth is the very reason why she's even gone now. Almost as if he took her into his kingdom. So you're dealing with your relationship with God being affected, being tested, confused. You have family members that are falling apart themselves. They're confused. They're hurt. They have to see their children hurt on top of this. And you're dealing with friendships that don't know how to respond to this. Therefore, putting you in a place of loneliness is what I'm going to assume.
Yeah.
So you're feeling lonely, confused. You barely got to know your daughter 13 days. She's gone. I guess, how were you either masking it or dealing with it?
I'd say more masking, because I definitely, dealing to me means that you're addressing the issue and you're trying to find some type of resolution to better yourself. When you mask it, which is what I was doing, is find, or even worded this way, is distraction. Distraction became more of a thing. Just trying to stay busy with, work. But then if it wasn't work, it was just trying to always be out and about, trying to do something. And then, it...
Did that lead, if you don't mind sharing, or if this even happened to you, did this lead to any kind of addiction?
Unfortunately.
That was helping, or you think that was helping you to deal with this and cope with this?
Pornography also became something that came into effect. Not happy to admit that, but I mean, that's something. And then, I don't want to say it became, in a sense, a drunkard, but I definitely started drinking more than I had ever had before. And it's still to this day, it is surreal, because I remember when I first got just filled with God's Spirit. I mean, I didn't have a craving for alcohol, so people used to do that thing if I showed up to a cookout. Oh, I forgot you can't drink because you're a Christian, right? It's like, no, I can, I just don't want to. I didn't have that desire, and unfortunately, when Jael passed away, I just felt like it was easier to accept like an alcoholic drink. So
you were, in a sense, you just wanted this to be known. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I didn't want to feel
trying to numb out this tragedy. So not only are you suffering emotionally, you even start to suffer physically with trauma due to the fact that your daughter is now gone. So now we enter a world of addictions that feel like I can escape for a moment.
Yeah, it just became, like I said, it's a temporary relief that you're trying to seek out a permanent solution. I mean, that stuff just temporarily fills the void. But then when whatever your poison is, right? I mean, like I said, if it is substance or anything of that nature, you still have to wake up and realize that you're going to have to deal with
it again.
It in your sobriety, or in a sober mindset, it's still going to be there.
Well, thank you for addressing that and bringing that to light, because we want to portray, I think especially in the society we're in today, nowadays, we want to portray an individual that is not hurting, that has it together, that, no, I'm good. And so addressing this just shows how human you are and how vulnerable we become once we enter something so tragic. And what's worse is, I personally know no one gave you the tools on how to handle this. Like you were saying, people got more intimidated by the fact that you were suffering, so they'd rather just leave you alone, pull away, instead of giving you tools
Yeah.
And saying, okay, Matthew, this is what it is. This is how we need to handle this and go about this. And so you are starting to grieve your daughter, and how long do you grieve her before you see some light? Just talking and pertaining about Jael.
So, I mean, to answer that question, you still grieve your loved ones still to this day. You know, I said her 9th birthday would be coming up this month, May 29th. So, still grieving her, but it's become healthier. I remember I was at work one day, and that was already painful as it is to have to go back to work because life still is going on around you. Just because you go through this deep turmoil, finances have to continue to be coming in because bills don't stop. The world doesn't stop turning, and you almost feel like that's unfair because the world is still spinning, and you have to eventually get back to it. But I remember I was working with a coworker and friend, Carlos, and I remember one day we were coming back because we worked out of Eunice, New Mexico, and we were coming back, and I had finally just decided to put on some worship, and I was just sitting there listening to the worship, and I just started praying, and you know when you're a parent, you know that you know your child's voice. And in my time of prayer, I heard my daughter's voice tell me, "Mommy, Daddy, I love you. What I'm seeing is unimaginable. I want you to bring as many people with you as you can."
And so this was the voice of your daughter.
Yeah.
And so even in this, even in your mess, even in your junk, even though you are withering away, even though you are slowly cutting ties, or you're going back and forth with God, like, I love you, but I'm confused. I love you, well, what's going on? Even in that, he still allowed your daughter to speak to you in such a way that he knew your dad needs to hear this. So it goes without saying, Jael is a prime warrior for the kingdom of God. And you and I have known that since I got pregnant with her. So from that moment, when you hear your daughter speak to you, does something change in you?
Briefly, I mean, yeah, at that moment, obviously, that encouragement was there to want to, in a sense, go back hard for the kingdom. I'm rephrasing the kingdom of heaven. But
not the streets.
Yeah, not the streets. No longer street warrior. But yeah, I mean, it helped out. There was another thing that arose, but I know that that's for a later discussion. But
so that kind of just lit a little fire.
Yeah.
For you when that encounter was allowed to happen. And so is that the only good memory you have of Jael, or is there something else you want to share about your daughter?
I just remember earlier I shared a story about my aunt that was, taken away a little too early by a drunk driver, but my grandfather Victor, I'll never forget, outside of my funeral that day. Point being, I want to share with everybody: don't ever stop telling your loved ones that you love them. Just because I hadn't told my grandfather that I had loved him so many years, just because you got older and it feels like that's something like little kids say. But I'll never forget, outside of my funeral, I looked at my grandpa and just seeing the look of devastation on his face, and obviously this years and years before we even lost our daughter. But my grandpa, I went up to him and said, "I love you, Grandpa," and he looked at me and says, "I love you too." He said, but I'm not supposed to be burying any of you all. You all are supposed to bury me. And then about 8 months later or so, my grandfather passed away, and I believe it was due to a broken heart. But the thing that blew me away was I never understood until the day that Jael was being put to rest that what my grandfather meant. And now I understand why I feel like that was one of the last deep, profound things that he said to me, because I now know what he meant. I was now living that nightmare that he was referring to, having to bury his child. I'm now in those in a sense, those shoes.
And so, do you have a memory, a good memory, that comes from your daughter?
Yeah, I just remember.
Or about
There was from the time that she was in the womb, there was a song by a hip hop artist, Christian named KB, and I would sing that song to her every day when she was in the womb, and I still continue to sing that song to her while she was physically here with us for those 13 days. And I just remember letting her get to hold my finger, because what that SMA does is it just completely deplenishes their overall muscle. There's nothing that they can really do on their own, but I just remember her squeezing my finger, and I just felt just this overwhelming peace that came from that, and just her just courageousness. That's what I miss most about her. I know that if she still would have been here with us, that she would have been the one that would have held her ground, but she still, and still to this day, is Daddy's princess. And I'm just ready to when due time comes, but for her to be able to run up to me and jump into my arms.
And so, you said that after that encounter with our daughter, there was a little bit of fire that was lit inside of you. And so that brings me to the second greatest loss, probably of our entire lives, gonna be. What led up to going from that encounter with Jael? What happened next that also gave you that fire back?
That fire came back when we found out that we were expecting our second baby.